Hey, what's happening, y'all? Excuse me for my little tardiness regarding the Manny Pacquiao and Tim Bradley fight, which um, which concluded in a trilogy. This is a third fight between the two combatants. They both had split a victory amongst each other. And even though the first fight, many dispute that fight because people felt that Pacquiao won. It is what it is in that situation. It is in the record books. I thought Pacquiao won myself, but I didn't think he won by that big of a margin as people suggested that he did. I thought that fight was a lot closer, than what the other observers would suggest. What they had scored in their eyes, not the judges, but the observers, like bloggers, vloggers, you name it. I mean, in that first fight, I thought it could have gone either way. That's just my opinion. But I still think that Pacquiao won in a close fight than what people suggested. But anyhow, third fight happened in Vegas over this weekend on Saturday night. Uh, Manny Pacquiao clearly won the fight, and obviously he was using more. He was using angles, his usual, unorthodox and awkward style of using angles and throwing flurry of punches left and right. What stood out in this fight is that two things. One, Pacquiao knocked down Bradley twice in this fight, which pretty much sealed the deal after the second knockdown. I think it came in an eighth round, I believe, or the ninth round. It was one of those later rounds, so that second knockdown had occurred, and that obviously widened the margins. But I thought the fight was a little closer. Was close between the two. I thought Pacquiao was up by a couple rounds after the seventh, but um, obviously, after that second knockdown, Tim Bradley clearly needed a victory to, not a victory. He needed a knockout or a knockdown by that matter. I think if he had scored a knockdown, maybe the fight could have been a little, judges could have scored it closer. But obviously, he did need a knockout, in my opinion, to win the fight. But but also another thing that stood out is that Tim Bradley wasn't quite as active as he usually is in other fights because he just wasn't really throwing any punches. He wasn't letting his hands go, and I found that kind of odd. I don't know. I mean, but I can say though, all fairness though, he did have better balance. He did have better footwork, and in this fight compared to his previous two Pacquiao fights. I mean, with all fairness, in the first Pacquiao fight, he did injure his ankle, so that disrupted his balancing, his footwork and his balance at the time when Joe Diaz was training him. Um, but after the fight, Pacquiao, I believe he did put out a statement that he would retire. In his minds and many people's minds, that he has nothing left to prove. He's accomplished so much in his career. Uh, he was one of the pound for pound best at one point. He was fighter of the century. He's fought the who's who's. He's fought in dangerous opposition. He did avoid some guys too, which I'll get to in another video. But at the same time, you have to respect the man. He did have a very respectable and great career. Again, he's fought the who's who's. He's fought, prime opposition. He's had some great trilogies with Eric Morales. Also, the well documented Antonio Mark. I mean, I'm sorry, Juan Manuel Marquez. The four fights they've had, and of course, the Bradley trilogy as well. He's also had a good rematch with Marco Antonio Barrera. So he fought some very formidable and tough opponents, especially in their prime, like the Moraleses and the Barreras, the Marquezes, which is those three fights before the fourth fight was very disputed. Those are very disputed fights. So Pacquiao in his career has had his fair share of controversy when he when he had during his fights. So uh, it is what it is there. Now, there's also been talk that Bob Arum doesn't think Pacquiao's retired, so he thinks he has another fight left to him. So it's kind of coincidental that he announces his retirement, then Bob Arum comes out a day later, say 24 hours later, say that he's not retired. He has another. I'm trying to mock the Bob Arum voice. He's not retired. He's got another. He's got another fight left in him. All right. And then Freddie Roach comes out and says that, there's also rumors swirling that Pacquiao's next opponent could be Canelo Alvarez if he gets past Amir Khan, which that fight is scheduled to go next month on Cinco de Mayo weekend. So that's about a few weeks away. I'll be honest with you. I know a lot of people are upset about that fight, but I'm really looking forward to it. It's a very intriguing matchup. And obviously, Amir Khan still has his hand speed. So definitely that won't be that the weight gain won't didn't really affect his hand speed because I've seen the sparring sessions whatnot. So, but that doesn't determine whether his footwork would be affected by the weight gain. So we have to wait and see when the fight does come about on that night. So, um, but Freddie Roach in an article. This is a shout out to Boxing Scene, by the way. Freddie Roach he had a concern about a potential Pacquiao and Canelo fight. His biggest worry is the weight disparity, which I have to agree because Canelo is a goddamn cruiserweight, if not almost a heavyweight when he's outside the ring. When he goes into fights, he's a borderline cruiserweight. So, well, actually, he is a borderline cruiserweight. So it's he could obviously Pacquiao will take the 155 fight, but how much more weight can he gain after 155? So definitely, if the fight were to be made, um, obviously the Pacquiao camp top rank, now they're working closely with Golden Boy. They're gonna want a rehydration clause in that, in that contract for the fight. So, yeah, that's gonna be a very, very telling situation there if it does, if the negotiations does get underway for that. But there's another suggestion that Ray Roach had made. He would prefer Pacquiao fighting Terrence Crawford. Now, the fighting weight, if that fight does get made, which I think that should be an ideal fight. But again, if you ask me, I don't think Pacquiao has nothing left to prove. But if he does want to pass the torch, and I thought this was going to be a pass the torch fight for Bradley, but apparently I was wrong. But if the Terrence Crawford fight were to be made, I think that should be a pass the torch fight. And I don't see Pacquiao winning that fight against Crawford because you're dealing with a very, very prime fighter. Now, Tim Bradley, on the other hand, he's been through some wars already, okay? He's been through a lot of tough fights in his career. You go to the Lamont Peterson, you go to the prime Miguel Vasquez, Junior Witter, Kendall Holt, which is one of his toughest fights in his career, a very, very tough, dangerous fight where Bradley got knocked down in the first round, but he was hurt from Kendall Holt, but he had to rally back and beat him. Ruslan Provodnikov, which is probably the most dangerous fight of his career, where he suffered significant damage, and I think neurologically he did. Devin Alexander, Luis Carlos Abrego. At one time, Abrego in his prime was a very dangerous welterweight that nobody wanted to fight because he was knocking everybody out. And Tim Bradley, who was fighting at 140 at the time, stood up and took the challenge and fought the guy at his weight and beat him. So Tim already had tough fights in his career. So people are going to suggest that Pacquiao is going to walk over Crawford, and I don't see that happening. To be honest with you, because Crawford is much more a bigger man, and he's much more quicker than Bradley, and he does have a longer reach and power than Bradley. So Pacquiao is going to have a very, very tough fight ahead of him if he decides to take that fight with Terrence Crawford. If he does take that fight, that should be the pass the torch fight for Crawford. But that's yet to be told. So we'll see how that where that stands. Now, where does Tim Bradley go from here? He did say he'll be back. He still feels that he has a few fights left in him. I mean, I wouldn't argue that. We'll see. Some were rumoring that he could fight Kell Brook. He could get a Keith Thurman fight. Well, I mean, we'll see. But the problem is Top Rank doesn't work well with Al Heyman. So they're actually in the middle of a lawsuit. So the Keith Thurman Tim Bradley fight, nah, that's highly unlikely at this point. If that fight realistically would be made, then we have to wait for the outcome of the litigation that's taking place between Top Rank Golden Boy and the defendants, which is Al Heyman and the PBC group. So yeah, we can see a Kell Brook Tim Bradley clash that could happen. We could probably see uh, I mean, shoot, ain't really too many welterweights. I mean, could be a Terrence Crawford, Tim Bradley fight that could happen. Maybe that could happen. So, we'll see what Tim could, what Tim wants to do. But honestly, if he were to say, you know what, I have nothing left to prove. I've been through a lot of tough fights in my career. I've beaten the best. I've beaten the top guys in my time. If he says, you know what, I'm gonna retire, I wouldn't be mad at him for doing that. I mean, he's done what he could do, just like Pacquiao, in my opinion. Even though Pacquiao has had more of a longevity of career than Bradley, but I think that both men are proven. They've beaten the best. They've beaten the who's who. So both men can walk out of the sport with their heads high. And both men both men are Hall of Famers, no question about it. So yeah, let me know what you think about this. Care to comment, share, subscribe. Oh, before I go, I'm hearing a lot of bickering now that there's been a big argument that's been raised, a little bit of a debate now in the YTBC about who's greater in their generation: Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather. Mayweather, I'm sorry, I keep butchering his last name sometimes, but yeah, I'm gonna do a separate video on that one because if you ask me, I don't think both men are not the greatest in their eras, and I'll save my reservations for that other video. So let me know what you think about this. Care to comment, share, subscribe. Signing off. Peace.